School District 121 School Board meeting. The first topic on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. So if you could all stand up and say the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which
Thank you, everyone. Next up is the approval of the agenda. Do we have any changes to tonight's agenda?
I do not.
I wasn't here for the June 8th regular meeting, so pulling that out for a separate vote, or I could just abstain from the vote as well instead of,
Either way is fine. I think it's fine if you abstain because we know why.
yeah, so
And if you got any other questions on the topics in the consent agenda, it doesn't mean you can't ask questions on it.
I'll just abstain from the vote.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay, with that being said, I move to approve the agenda.
Second.
Second by Beals. Roll call.
Motion. Excuse me. Motion by Schultz, second by Beals. Mr. DeMonte,
Yes.
Mrs. Blair,
Yes.
Mrs. Martinez,
Yes.
Mr. Anderson,
Yes.
Mrs. Beals, Mr. Schultz.
Yes.
6 yes, motion carries.
Thank you. Next up is recognitions, and it is so great to see lots of people here to be in person and to be recognized.
And I think I'm gonna, Dr. Keeley, are gonna come forth first.
Tonight, we're going to be fortunate enough to recognize both our spring and summer sports this year. We kind of combine them together because of the timing of everything. Ms. Belmont, our athletic director, will not only recognize those teams that won conference champs or regional champs, but we're also tonight that are here, our student athletes that are here are going to be recognized as all-state athletes, which is quite the accomplishment, especially everything they've been through this year. It's even more sweeter to have this many kids be recognized at that high of a level. So, Ms. Belmont.
Good evening, everyone. Before I begin with the many accomplishments of our spring and summer sports seasons, I'd like to take a moment to congratulate and thank all the Warren athletes and coaches for this year. A lot has happened in the last 15 months. Having athletics in the midst of a pandemic was strange and difficult, to say the least. There was much uncertainty if sports would get to compete at all. There were many changes in rules during the season and numerous unknowns throughout the year. Many sports didn't get the opportunity to have state finals or a championship. But through it all, the coaches and athletes did not complain. They were grateful to have a season and competed as hard they could all the way through their seasons. I'm thankful to all of our athletes and coaches for making this year the best it could possibly be. Now for the next slide. The North Suburban Conference is an extremely competitive conference, and championships are not easy to come by. In the spring season, both football and boys soccer not only won the NSC championship, they dominated their opponents and went undefeated the entire season. In the summer season, boys lacrosse, girls soccer, softball, boys track, and boys volleyball made up for the missed season by winning the NSC championship as well. Congratulations to all of our conference champion teams. The girls soccer team, coached by Ryan McCabe, won the regional championship for the second season, not year, in a row. The softball team, coached by Jenna Charbonneau, won the regional championship for the 8th straight season. Quite an accomplishment for both of those teams. Next, our state qualifiers. The girls track team qualified 3 athletes to the IHSA state finals. Annika Bynum in the high jump, Elila Ditikankin in the 100-meter hurdles, and Mia Pasha in the 3,200-meter run. The boys track team qualified in 5 events. Luke Wiley in the 3,200-meter run and the 1,600-meter run. Griffin Pasha in the 1,600-meter run. Nathan Garcia, Ryan Motes, David Lara, and Mike Zeisler competed in the 4x800-meter run. Jalen Duffy competed in the 200 as well as the 4x100-meter relay. Cassius Callahan, Jalen Turner, Joel Williams, and Aaron Ayubami also competed in the 4x100 meter relay. Could I have our all-state athletes come on up, please? Just line up, face the board. All right. Here are our all-state athletes. They are the best of the best in Illinois. First, we have Tommy Matheson, who's an all-state football player. He played on both sides of the ball, dominating the offensive and defensive lines. Next, we have Malachi McNeil, the all-state football. He was a leader of a very good defense for Warren that only gave up 27 points the entire season. Next, Nick Diana, all-state soccer. Nick was a goalie for the soccer team, and he had the lowest goal against in the season at .37, which means he gave up less than a goal a game. Next, we have Max Floriani, all-state soccer. Of his many accolades, he was also invited and played in the high school All-American game in St. Louis in May. Sebastian Rodriguez, all-state soccer player. Sebastian played a very important part of the team's success in their undefeated season. Ishan Shah, all-state soccer. He also had the highest average points per game in school history at 3.14. And we have Ella Skelton, all-state soccer. Ella led the team to both a conference and regional championship. Ella is a true leader and was named one of 3 captains for the all-area team. Haley Conger, who was just named All-State yesterday in softball. Haley led the Blue Devils to a 14-0 conference record and an IHSA regional championship. Next, we have Luke Wiley. He placed second in the 3,200 and sixth in the 1,600 in the IHSA state meet last weekend, earning All-State honors in 3A. It's a very tough double, and it was in extreme heat. He did a great job. Griffin Pasha placed 5th in the 1,600 at the IHSA state meet, earning All-State honors in 3A, also in pretty tough conditions. Next, we have Annika Bynum, who I will talk a little bit more about in just a minute. So let's give all of our all-state athletes a round of applause.
I got a question. So you guys never complained about all the changes? I just can't believe it.
Okay, some other notable accomplishments from our spring and summer season. Boys soccer coach Jason Honan was named the IHSSCA Coach of the Year, which is the Illinois High School Soccer Coach Association. Nick Diana was named to the United Soccer Coaches Association All Midwest team. Max Floriani was named Illinois Gatorade Player of the Year. He was also United Soccer Coaches Association All American and the IHSSCA Player of the Year. Ishan Shaw was named Chicagoland Soccer Player of the Year. Next, we have our state champion, Annika Bynum. Annika jumped a personal best 5'8" to become the 3A state champion. The competition was really intense. It's actually kind of hard to explain. It was really exciting. Annika faced elimination more than once and rose to the occasion, showing what a tough competitor she is. She won the state title on the very last jump of the entire competition. I think that's worth it. And our last slide, over the weekend, our junior, Keegan Knott, who is not here tonight because she's probably still at the Olympic trials, she made the USA Paralympic team in swimming. She'll be competing in the 400 free in Tokyo in August. Quite an honor to represent the United States in the Olympics. Congratulations to all of our athletes and all of our coaches. It was a different year, but a really fantastic year. I don't know if we've ever had in a season this many all-state athletes. So congratulations, everyone. Thank you.
Congratulations.
No, we're really interesting, I swear.
Personally.
No, I swear we're interesting.
Oh,
That's impressive.
Probably in the back if there is. Here comes Jean, she's got it.
next up on the agenda is the reception of visitors. Keep in mind two things. There's another chance to address the board at the end of the meeting too, in case something comes up. We do not have anybody signed up right now, but that does not prevent anybody from addressing the board. So if you'd like to address the board, you're more than welcome to address come up to the podium, state your name and address, and you can have 3 minutes to address the board. Keep in mind, it's not a dialogue, but we're very interested in anything that you might have to say. Is there anybody who would like to address the board? Podium's all yours, if you would like, or if you've got a loud voice, go right there. Okay.
Good evening. Thank you for having me. I thought it was a room full of people, so I was going to change my agenda a little bit to go back to, I know some of the board has heard some things I've said before, so I was going to change, but then I thought that was a lot of people. So you guys may have heard of this before, but I see there's some new people out, so I'm going to go ahead and go to start off with the mass to begin with, okay? So I'll start off with my history. So I'm an anesthetist. My history is for 35 years. I've worked and I put people to sleep for surgery. So my main objective is to monitor their airway, oxygen, carbon dioxide. That's my goal, right? Vital signs, et cetera, while they're asleep. So a lot of people say right now, just wear the mask, right? Everybody just wear the mask. It's good. It saves lives, but not a soul anywhere talks about how bad the mask is for you. And it is bad. I see patients every day that come in with the mask on. Now people are starting to not wear it so much, so it's a little different. But I have seen multiple patients come in and they have symptoms. I see it on monitors, right? So I'm gonna go over just a few things to let you know the different signs and symptoms of, and what I want to do, what we want to do, I represent, we have like 150 different, a group of us that we meet every other week, and we all are like-minded. We want to get the mask off our kids, okay? It is not good for them, and for multiple reasons, okay? So I'm just going to go over a few reasons why. So anybody that wears a mask, first of all, you have got, when you're breathing without a mask, you breathe normally, there's no resistance. It's easy, you don't even think about it. When you put that mask on, you start thinking about it. You're breathing against resistance. That is not natural, okay? One layer resistance, 2 layer, more. So that increases your work of breathing. Every single breath, a little bit of work, okay? Little bit. So the kids, you can't tell, right? Because they're running around, they're skinny, they're healthy. but it is taxing their body. Okay, so that's one reason. Then if you have a pocketed mask or just a little mask, your carbon dioxide is sitting in there. You exhale 4% carbon dioxide on every breath. That's enormous. It's like 100 times more than our air, right? Is 0.038%. So a little bit of everything they inhale on every single breath is highly concentrated in carbon dioxide. So, okay, you're lowering your O2 right there, you're diluting it, you're raising your carbon dioxide. There's things that love to grow in your body with a low oxygen content, okay? The second killer in America is cancer, and it loves low oxygen. When you go to certain doctors to get treated for cancer, they give you hyperbaric oxygen, extra oxygen, because the cancer does not like that. So cancer thrives in an environment. You know, let's say that kids are running around with, instead of 100% oxygen or 100 millimeters mercury, let's say it's 90. So you can't tell by looking at them, but it is decreased, okay? So their body's working harder. That's stress, okay? So anytime you're under stress, your immune system's not gonna work as well. Your body's stressed. It traps bacteria.
You're running close on your time,
Okay,
so
I know
please
you
wrap
guys
it up.
saw this. So this is bacteria and mold that grew in my face mask I wore at home for 1 hour. My husband and I plated it on a Petri dish. We've done this for people I work with. This grows mold, bacteria, and lots of it. And can you imagine children? They're rubbing this, they're blowing their nose. Who knows what they're doing with it? The mask is all over. So they're inhaling this stuff right into their lungs. You're not supposed to do that, okay? You know, so they have bacterial pneumonia on the rise and different things like that. Psychological stress, okay. Not seeing faces, I can't take it. So anyway, so it's traumatic for the kids. And I'd like to ask the board, and I know it's not a dialogue, but I came and spoke with you guys a couple of weeks ago. Is there anything that has been done to actually move the ball in the children not being forced to wear a mask when they go back to school?
There's been no change from the state.
Okay. So, you know, and also we are a country of laws, right? So
Appreciate your time, but you're
okay,
well
I'm going to
over your
wrap it
allotted
up.
time.
I'll wrap
Yes.
it up right here. So by forcing people to wear a mask, that you are breaking laws, okay? So people have got to start being responsible. And please, you guys represent our kids, okay? Just do whatever you can. We appreciate it. We don't want to hear your hands are tied. We don't want to hear that. You represent us. Thank you.
Thank you for your time tonight.
Okay, thanks.
Is there anybody else who'd like to address the board? Go ahead. Come on up here. Please state your name and address. And again, 3 minutes and
Good evening. My name is Kim Mansoros, 2164 Cherrywood Court, Gurnee. I would like to talk a little bit about the masks and why it's unconstitutional that our kids are being forced to wear them, and a little bit of touch real briefly on the vaccine. This is from a notice to establishments from the healthyamerican.org in association with the constitutionlawgroup.com. There is no statutory law that requires any establishment to require you to wear a mask, whether it's a school, a business, and any kind of establishment. These are guidelines of the State Department of Health and local health boards. Any other order is unlawful. Preventing entry into an establishment of someone not wearing a mask violates these laws: the Illinois Constitution, U.S. Constitution, First and Fourth Amendment, Federal Civil Rights Law, Title 11, Section 2000, Illinois Civil Rights Law, 775, ILCS 5/1-011-010257A 102 and 104. When you refuse any public entry, you restrict free movement of the individual, and that's where it falls under the Constitution, and that is unlawful. Furthermore, it is unlawful to enforce 6 feet of separation, as it restricts the movement of individuals. Declaring this as your school or store policy does not absolve you from your violation of the law. And there are no regulations on the books that require you to operate a school, business, or any kind of establishment with plexiglass dividers restricting number of people in a room, capacity, etc. School districts that have been verified that have gone against these so-called rules from the ISBE are districts 313, 323, 10, 74, and 100. Those are the ones that are so far been verified. As far as the vaccinations go, I heard that, the school district is pretty much almost practically pressuring parents into getting their kids vaccinated. There is an actual petition for temporary restraining order in effect. From America's Frontline Doctors, they filed a petition of temporary restraining order against the Secretary of the U.S. Department of HHS, which is the Health and Human Services. Being that there is statistically 0% chance of young people dying of COVID-19, and to promote investigational product that has no long-term studies and no animal studies to pressure parents and teens to use experimental product that has not been fully approved by the FDA breaks all the rules of medicine and the HHS own goals to protect Americans. And that's not all that's on here, but I'm briefing. COVID-19 side effects. We have never seen this level of side effects for any vaccine without FDA taking action. The rotavirus vaccine was canceled for 15 cases of non-lethal side effects, and the swine flu vaccine was canceled for 25 deaths. But now the CDC's own data, we are seeing a 12,000% increase in deaths with these vaccines, and they are still promoting this to our kids. Supporting the science, under the age of 20, the survivability rate for COVID-19 is 99.997%. More than 4,000 deaths have been tied to the administering of the COVID-19 vaccines from the last 4 months, as opposed to 1,500 total in the previous 10 years of all vaccines. Within the last couple of days, the WHO has updated their website because of lack of evidence for the use against COVID-19 for the vaccines. They're lowering their recommendations. They are saying our kids should not be receiving these vaccines. So for the rules to be in effect that our kids, if they are exposed to another student because our kid is not vaccinated, to be out of school for 10 days with no chance of remote learning, I'm pretty sure that violates something. I will probably find out about that, but that's not fair. Our kids are entitled to a free public education. And if you are going to require them without our acceptance, then you need to allow them to have some kind of remote learning. That just doesn't make sense for our kids to have to struggle to get back 10 days of schoolwork or whatever it is, because our kids are not going to be vaccinated because it is not safe. There is a 13-year-old kid who just died recently, 3 days after his second dose, of a large heart with water around it because of the vaccine. And that's just one case. And then I told you the numbers on the others.
Okay, we need to wrap it up, please.
Okay, so that's where I stand. So, something to think about. And I don't really even know that you can ask us because of the HIPAA violations, if you can ask us if our kids are vaccinated or not, but a lot of us are very much against it. But thank you for your time.
Thank you for your time tonight. Is there anybody else who would like to address the board? Go ahead. Just keep in mind, everybody, it's 3 minutes.
Small business owner in the area. And it's actually the law for me not to discriminate against my customers. And I feel that as I see our schools treat our children, I feel like our children are being discriminated against. And nobody should ever force a medical request upon someone. If someone wants to wear a mask and they think it works, that should be their choice. If somebody wants to get vaccinated and they think that works, they should have that choice. No one should ever be forced to have a medical procedure. But our children are not being taught to think critically. And that is one thing that is disappointing when it comes to our schools, is that our children are not being taught to think for themselves. They're being told by schools to do this, do this, do this. Or to, even though the COVID-19 has a 99.99% survival rate for teenagers, why are we ruining their lives? Why are we ruining their lives for this? We need to let them breathe fresh air. We need to let them make their health decisions with their parents, not being a school district that is making those decisions for the children. We have children that are having side effects to the COVID shot, and we have children living in fear because of these rules. And children should be able to grow up free and enjoy their high school years. The high school years are some of the best years of their lives. And I know for me that especially my senior year was one of the best years of my life. And I am listening to children that come into my business say that their high school years have been ruined and that their senior year was the worst year of their life. And it's because of the decisions that adults are making that have to do with their life and their experience in being able to mature and become a responsible adult in our society. But they should be able to be promoted in ways that help them use critical thinking and not be told or frightened into a decision. And I think a lot of people are making decisions out of fear, and making decisions out of fear are not when wise decisions are made. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time tonight. Is there anybody else who'd like to address the board? Go ahead.
Julia Lundstrom, 33259 North Valley View Drive, Wildwood. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your efforts. This has been a very difficult year to 18 months. Recently, I received a communication regarding, as brought up before, that students who are not vaccinated will be asked to quarantine. My question is, due to exposure, my question is, what are your parameters on exposure? How do you define exposure? Does anyone know? Is it a certain amount of time? Is it a certain distance?
We said before, ma'am, it's not a dialogue.
That's okay.
We'd be
It's in
happy
the
to send
record.
you that information if you'd like it, but we're not going to have a
I
20-minute debate.
really think that if you're going to send that out and you're going to use exposed, it needs to be more clearly defined for the parents so that we understand and so that we can keep track for our children. So during this time of quarantine, what kind of access will the children have to teachers and to materials? The communication seemed very abrupt and actually rather discriminatory. And my question would be, is this offering the least restrictive learning environment for our children? Is it being discriminatory against students whose parents and those students have decided that in their best interest, whether or not to be vaccinated? And I guess my next question would be, how do you know if they've been vaccinated? All right. Also, as we're planning for our children's education, I'd like to make sure that we're taking care of their physiological needs. And I understand that in the very beginning, there was a lot of fear around COVID. But as stated earlier, there's a 99.99% chance of survival if they contract it. If it's a known contraction, a lot of students in the high school age don't even have symptoms. Also, are they feeling safe? Do students feel safe when there are masks over everybody's faces? Can they see expressions? Can they see students that are getting angry or that are having problems? Okay, so they're not mature enough to read micro expressions. Then sense of belonging and love. This is all towards self-actualization, and that is the responsibility of every adult in this room, for every child that walks through those doors. I'm a teacher as well. My job is to make sure that every child reaches their potential. And are we making sure that our policies work towards that? Granted, we don't have control over everything, but we do have control over what goes on within our walls. And that's what I would ask you to consider. With CRT, whether you're calling it critical race theory or culturally responsive teaching, will teachers and staff be trained in sensitivity to shaming of all kinds so that it may be eliminated for all? Esteem, will respect for each and every individual student and their ideas be preserved? Self-esteem, will it be encouraged and developed in each individual? Freedom of thought, safe places to think out loud. Self-actualization in the 21st century, skills for students go hand in hand. Lack of any prejudice, which gives way to creativity and the ability to be flexible, spontaneity of thinking and communication, problem solving through collaboration and use of critical thinking, acceptance and facts, informational literature, which needs to be accepted from all sides of a discussion. I understand you have to follow Illinois Department of Public Health and Lake County probably. But are they mandates or are they laws? And I would ask you to fight for the students and to fight for the education that you seem to be devoted to. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else who'd like to address the board right now?
Jeff Lundstrom. Currently, I reside in Nevada. I'm in the military. I'm active duty National Guard currently right now, working with the vaccination teams around the state. And we've seen a dramatic decline in vaccinations. Most of the stationary teams have been all disbanded around the state. We were going from 1,400 vaccinations. We're down now to dozens per week. I have personally witnessed kids coming in absolutely visibly shaking, emotionally distraught because their parents have made them come in to get their vaccination. I've also seen after effects during the wait time after they've got the vaccination where they've had to be attended by our nurses, whether it be side effects of the vaccine or the emotional state that they were in. There have been, the WHO announced today that the World Health Organization that vaccines should not be given to kids. They just announced that today. So I'm not sure, there are so many variables right now with where the instructions are coming from with all of this vaccination aspect. Right now, multiple national parks have been absolutely jam-packed with people going on vacation to the point where they're thinking about making reservations because they are absolutely overdrawn, but there are no mass breakouts anywhere. Yellowstone has been absolutely overrun. Glacier National Park, no max, and no one's wearing masks. Nowhere. Living in Nevada, I've been to California numerous times. People don't wear masks in California either, even when the rules were in effect. And the thing is that this is primarily around the larger metropolitan areas. You get out into rural America, or some of the states are less populous, they want nothing to do with any of the vaccinations because they haven't had a breakout. There are states, multiple states throughout the country that have twice the population of Illinois and similar sized cities that did not go into lockdown last year. And they did not have mass breakouts, especially their kids were going to school full time. So I don't understand where the guidelines are coming from for our kids not to be in school learning. I have twins. One of them failed out last year. We took him out of school because he was failing virtual. And the so-called hybrid only brought him from his bedroom into an auditorium. There was no personalized teaching. And for that, we've now had to completely change his educational process because he doesn't learn in his bedroom. He needs to be in a classroom. And, you know, there's a possibility that being a twin, that he may fall behind his brother. And that in itself is emotional degradation to him. And I don't know where you're getting your guidelines for, but the letter that we received that said that there's going to be a 10 to 14 day quarantine and no accommodations made for those kids is absolutely irreprehensible. It's just, it's not something that should have even been sent out to sit there and force the parents to have their kids vaccinated when it's not necessary. Thank you.
Thank you for your thoughts and your time tonight. Is there anybody else who'd like to address the board tonight? If not, we're going to move forward into the president's report. Couple topics here. We're going to end with the superintendent search at the end, if that's okay.
Sure.
Couple quick things. Attached is the Board of Education significant dates. Please pull it out when you have time and make sure that you're available for all those dates. We've got a lot of important meetings coming up, both in open and closed session, plus some finance meetings. The other thing is the board committee assignments. I've gotten all your feedback and we've reassigned everybody to the committees that they want to be on. A couple of things to note. If you have an interest in a specific meeting that you're not part of, it doesn't prevent you from attending that meeting just because you're not on the list. We're all welcome to go to any meetings that we want to. So don't think that inhibits you from going to anything. And the other thing I have for board member topics for future meetings, I'd like to have more of a discussion about this next week, but I just want to kind of tee it up a little bit, is kind of our social media presence for the district. I know about a year ago, we started talking about this and we started working on our Facebook and some other ways to get communication out to the parents. And we had really good intentions of what we were going to do. And then the pandemic hit us and we went to more, instead of informational, to a lot of videos to keep people appraised of what's going on. And that's good. That's what we needed at the time. But I'd like to pull some of the focus back into some of the original intentions. I don't want to go as far as saying it's about branding the high school, but I think we need to engage with the community a bit more and let them know how much greatness is going on at Warren Township High School. I know at the finance meeting the other week, we heard a lot of good information, but we also heard that we don't promote ourselves a lot. People hear more of the negative than the positive at times. So what I did is I just went on other people's social media and found out a lot of great events. And we found out tonight, a lot of great things are happening in Warren that we're not telling people about. And I shame on me, shame on us for not doing more to promote that. So we talk about how great our sports are here. So we know the football team went undefeated this year. I think they went undefeated last year too in the regular season. Our football team has gone undefeated regular season 2 years in a row. That should be a big deal. Boys soccer went undefeated. Girls soccer, regional champs, track, all the championships, softball, all the national letter of intent signees. We talk about how important sports is. I know what's important to my kids' high school experience. They went on to play Division I sports. We have all these kids who are going to college. If we want to engage people and parents, boy, there's nothing better than having the high school say, hey, Malachi, he's got a scholarship to South Dakota, or I forget where exactly he's going. We should be promoting those things. Academics. We had 2 kids last year get a perfect ACT score. Holy catfish. I can't even imagine that. I mean, we want to talk about how great we are academically. We should be talking about that. National Merit Scholars. Going back to sports. Tommy Matheson was here tonight. He's the only second Warren student to receive the IHSA All-American team. The second time our schools had one of those. We said nothing about it. We've had the Warren Teacher of the Year, Science Olympiad, the student programs. The jazz band had their first live performance in over 14 months. That would have been great to hear more about it or see more about it. We had a virtual honors show, virtual honors art show. That would have been great. We talk about Annika tonight, Max, Floriani, Illinois Gatorade Player of the Year. Again, second time in the school history we had one of those. We should be promoting all those things. And I am not Mr. Branding. I am not Mr. Facebook by any means. And I think sometimes the problem is when we talk about social media, whether it's a school or business, we can overcomplicate it, like have a committee set up. Let's make sure it's clean, it's appropriate content and all that. I don't think it has to be overcomplicated. I mean, just a one-page snapshot saying, hey, here's all these kids, congratulations, sport, we're playing college. Hey, you know what, Max, Gatorade Player of the Year, congratulations. Great way to get us out into the public with a lot of positive news. I think that was one of our original intents of the Facebook, and direction got changed as it should have, but I want to get back into that focus. Now, some of my open questions that I don't know, so next meeting during the President's Report, I'd like to talk about it more, but how do we do it? I don't want to overcomplicate it. I don't think we need a third party to help us out. We've got a lot of smart teachers. We got a lot of smart students. I know we've got board members who are really good at social media. we need to get back to this and really promote how great Warren is and make sure everybody in the city knows how great it is. So again, I'll step back off my soapbox now, but I just want to say, you know what? I'd like to get back and really strongly promote Warren. So think about that next meeting, and let's have more of a conversation from the board and administration, whoever, and what possible next steps are.
Good.
Because everybody loves to see their name or their kid's name out there somewhere. Next up. No. Last thing under the president's report is the superintendent search process. And I'm going to gladly turn it over to Mr. Anderson, who's been taking the lead on this.
Okay, so you all remember that last meeting, we discussed this in some detail. So Jean assisted me in reaching out to our IASB representatives who do the executive searches. And tonight we have Patricia Sullivan Vineyard and Alan Mulby here from the IASB executive search team. And they're going to just present their process, how they would go about it. And I think you'll find, and from my experience, I should say, since I've done 3 of these already, that the process remains somewhat similar between different types of firms. So after they're done, we can certainly discuss this in more detail. The goal will be, to me, if we decide we want to go this route, then we can vote on it. If we want to think about it and vote on it next meeting, we can do that. But I'd like for us to decide that during our conversation after their presentation. And So that being said, Patricia, if you'd like to proceed.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Thank you. Good evening. Appreciate you having us here. As Mr. Anderson said, my colleague and I are from the Illinois Association of School Boards. We're from the Executive Searches Division. And we're going to go over some information about the process, the fee, hopefully answer any questions you have. And with Dr. Ingram retiring at the end of this upcoming school year.
Algram.
I'm sorry.
Algram.
Dr. Algram.
I'm sorry, pronounced it incorrectly. Thank you for the correction. Retiring at the end of this upcoming year, now is the time to think about it, make plans, and start that process. We're going to show a relatively brief PowerPoint, answer any questions you might have. And thank you. Brandon has our PowerPoint. He's going to advance it for us when we cue him. As Mr. Anderson said, I'm Patricia Vineyard. I'll introduce myself briefly. I'm in my 39th year of education, retired 2 years ago after 37 years in full-time education, all but my first year in Illinois. Was a teacher, interventionist, principal, assistant superintendent, and ended my career in the LaGrange Highlands area as a superintendent. I have quite a bit of high school experience as both a high school teacher and an assistant superintendent for curriculum and instruction at the high school level. My colleague, Mr. Mulby, is going to introduce himself. He's going to kick us off, and then I'll pick up with the actual process steps.
Thanks, Trish. Hi, good evening. Thanks for having us tonight. My name is Al Mulby, and I too am a consultant with the Illinois Association of School Boards. I've been with IASB for 6 years now. I'm a retired superintendent also. I was a superintendent for 15 years in Hillside Elementary District in suburban Cook County. Prior to that, I had been an administrator in Manheim School District around the airport, and also I was a teacher and a coordinator in a variety of districts, both at the high school and the middle school level. I retired after 38 years in education. And as I said, this has been my 6th year with IASB. I've worked with districts primarily in the northern part of the state. Both of us work out of the Lombard office. However, we do work throughout the whole state of Illinois. And we have colleagues in our Springfield office that also we work with too. I've probably worked with and directed about 40 searches for districts throughout the northern part of the state, and I've assisted on several others, and I would look forward to the opportunity to work with you. Like I also said too, our goal is to work with you as doing basically the grunt work for a superintendent search. It's the board search, and we certainly know that. And our job is to put together the best possible search for you, bring you the best possible candidates to get the best fit for your next superintendent. And so that's hopefully how the process would go. If you want to go ahead and advance to the next slide there, please. Our goal as your association is to serve you as a school board. We work only with the districts in Illinois, although we draw candidates from all over the country for our superintendent searches. But because we're the association for Illinois school boards, we work only with the 850 districts throughout the state. And like I said, our job doesn't end when you hire a superintendent and sign a contract, because we want the success to continue after that. So we have a lot of mechanisms in place to help that continue beyond just what would normally be considered the headhunting portion of a search, bringing you candidates to interview and to hopefully hire for your position. We want the success to be for the community, for the students, and for you as a board with your next superintendent. And so that's our job, and it goes beyond just the search process. Good. And as board members, you all know, of course, that your main job is the first thing that's itemized there in the foundational principles of effective governance for school boards, and that is to employ a superintendent. And our job is to make that as easy for you as we can, because it's a very difficult process, and we know that, and we want to make sure that it is a smooth process for you as a board and for the staff and for the district. Okay, next slide. We've been doing it for a lot of years, over 50 years of doing searches for IASB. With our consultants, we have over 300 years of combined experience in education, and we've been involved in almost 300 superintendent searches during the time that we've been doing this. We're an equal opportunity and search agency, and our job is to basically provide the best service for you that we can and assist you in any way that we can throughout the whole process. Trish is going to go through the steps of the process, but you need to know that we are here for you during this whole time from tonight on through and beyond the employment of your next superintendent. Even though we only serve the districts in the state of Illinois, like I said, we draw candidates from all across the country and actually internationally too. We attract a diverse, top quality cadre of candidates and applicants for your position. These are just a variety of some of the places where we promote your position. We have found that when administrators are looking to relocate in Illinois, the first place that they look as far as vacancies is on our website and on IASA, the school administrator's website. We are linked together with them, and we are also linked through all of these different organizations and agencies, and we are also part of a national superintendent searchers association where 40 states have organizations similar to us that do these types of searches, and you have a brochure for that in your folder. So we attract candidates from all across the country. So we conduct a nationwide search, but we focus on the specific needs of your district and attract candidates for that. Again, when we advertise and promote the position, after we get through the initial steps of putting together the ideal candidate and the brochure that actually promotes your district itself, we advertise it through a variety of different places, organizations, and they're all linked together, obviously, technologically, as far as posting these positions. So once we put our position out there, it gets promoted through a variety of different organizations and agencies that will attract candidates from all across the country.
Thank you, Al. And I would just add to that screen that we also have a really extensive email list, and it currently stands at over 10,000 individuals who have requested and receive each one of our superintendent postings. Most of them are in Illinois, but some of them are superintendents in other states wanting to return to or come to Illinois. And as well as aspiring superintendents, assistant superintendents, business managers, principals, a variety, CSBOs. And so that list grows every year, and it sits at over 10,000 individuals right now who receive every one of our advertisements. So on to the nuts and bolts of what the process would look like. Brandon, next slide, please. So we have what's called a standard search. And the standard search everybody gets. And sometimes a district has serious financial restraints or serious time restraints, and they just only want the standard search. Most districts, we have 5 optional additional steps, and there are a couple of them that many, many districts want, and they want them for good reason. So when we present to you, when we talk about presenting to a school district, we think about what we know about the district. Are they on a super tight time frame where it's March or April and they really would love to get somebody in place by July 1st? That's obviously a different time frame than what you're looking at right now. So as I go through this, I'm going to point out if it is optional, and if it's an optional one that we thought would be good for you folks. But just because it's optional and we're recommending it, you would not have to do it. B, if there's one that's optional that we didn't recommend, you could say, you know what, actually that one sounds pretty good for our board. So please know this is a proposal, but obviously if and when a contract is signed, you would say, of the optional pieces, we actually do want this, don't want that, what have you. So I'm going to walk through it as if what I'm recommending is what you would go with. So with the process, you get a search coordinator, and you get which would be myself, and you get a co-facilitator, and that would be Mr. Mulby. So you get a team of 2, but you have one person who's your main contact, so you're not worried about who am I telling what to. And one of the first things we do is establish a timeline. In just a moment, I'm going to have you pull out a sample, a tentative timeline that we created that we would like to propose to you, but it's tentative. You could say, like this, want to move this up, want to move that back. And I created it in light of the board meetings you already have scheduled. And I'll talk about that when we get to it. So one of the first things we do is you really want community input and involvement to the degree possible and appropriate in order for the search to be seen as transparent, legitimate, and responsive in the eyes of your community. And again, with a full year to do it, no reason not to. One of the first things we do, and we would propose doing it yet this summer, is a survey. So of course we survey and interview, talk to board members. But in addition to that, we administer an online survey that we send it to you along with language, sample language of what you would send it out with, that you would send to staff, faculty, parents, community members. For a high school, we could create one that would be suitable for students too, if you would wish. And that's getting that upfront feedback. What are we looking for in the next superintendent? What kinds of traits, skills, and competence are we looking for, as well as things like residency and previous experience and those kinds of things. We get input from everybody about that. One of the optional pieces at the last bullet, I did not have on your, let me double check that. I did not have on your proposal, but it really might be one that you would be interested in, is something to supplement the surveys. Some districts, a number of districts, want us to supplement those surveys with some actual focus groups that are in person, face to face. We'd probably want to do those, obviously, in August when folks are back around, back in the area away from vacations. That would be face to face, gather perceptions and insights, and that would supplement the survey information. Next slide, please. From that, from board surveys and interviews, from community staff surveys, and if we do the focus groups, from all of that information, we create what is called an ideal candidate profile. It summarizes what is this district looking for in its next superintendent, quantifies and codifies that. From that, we develop a tailored brochure that's called an announcement of vacancy, and we disseminate that all over the state and the nation. And that was through all of the things that Mr. Mulby mentioned, all of the various state and national organizations, including the National Association of Superintendent Searchers, as well as that email list of 10,000 individuals, current and aspiring superintendents. We also give you guidance on a compensation package Now, there was a law passed in the fall of 2019, which precludes us now and precludes you from asking candidates what they're currently making. But what we do have is regional data about superintendent pay. Low salary, high salary, average salary, some of those kinds of data we can provide to you. We do all of the collecting and verifying of candidates' applications, qualifications, and licensure. Saves you a ton of time and vetting. Brandon, next slide, please. We analyze the applications in light, don't just analyze them, but in light of your specific candidate profile. We narrow the slate of candidates. We verify references and conduct limited background inquiries. One of the optional, but in this instance, recommended pieces that more and more districts have asked us to do is to assist screening down from the top 10 or 12 to the 6 that we would bring to you. And that is that Mr. Mulby and I would do face-to-face screening interviews of those individuals. Because we can talk to them over the phone, we can analyze and screen them to a degree. Without the face-to-face interview, we get a lot more and better and richer and deeper information if we're able to do those face-to-face interviews. We then confirm and bring to you a candidate of approximately, a slate, excuse me, of approximately 6 candidates. Next slide, please. That can be customized. We had a district recently that said, we actually want 10 candidates because we kind of have this other process and thing we'd like to do with them. And some say, you know, if it's 3 or 4 or 5, kind of wherever you see that natural cutoff of the good candidates, but I will tell you, it's typically 4 to 6 in the range of 6. We help you with first round, second round, and site visit if you decide to do that, protocols, do's, don'ts, tips, questions, legal considerations, scheduling, just a wide variety of things to keep you feeling organized, on track, not worrying about have I forgotten something or how do we do this or that. The middle bullet there is optional. And again, I'll show you the breakdown by cost so you know, well, what are we talking about here if it's optional? But this is becoming increasingly popular and important, an aspect that's really growing with demand for us. And that is when you get to, let's say we bring you 6 candidates, you interview those 6 and you boil it down to your semifinalists or narrow it down. Let's say there typically are 2, usually 2, sometimes 3. Let's say you have 2 semifinalists. What this piece would be is having a stakeholder group interact with those finalists. So not the original 6, but once you narrow it down to your semifinalists, that we have a representative stakeholder group or groups who are able to interact with, answer some questions, or excuse me, have the candidates answer some questions that they have generated. We take care of all of that. The questions, communicating, orienting those stakeholders, do's, don'ts. We're there, we facilitate, make sure nothing illegal is asked, which sometimes can happen just through someone trying to be friendly and not realizing it's a question they can't ask. We summarize those data. We also make sure they know they're not making the decision. They're giving input, but they are not voting, ranking, they're not discussing and coming to a consensus as a group. They themselves are giving some written input. Also, I want to mention now, so I don't forget that, both with the focus groups that can be done up front, the in-district focus groups, as well as this piece, the stakeholder interviews with the semifinalists, those can be conducted, can be facilitated in a language other than English, for example, Spanish, if that is a need. So that would be something that we would just want to talk about early on so we can make sure that we would have those arrangements made, but we certainly can have that accommodation and that piece in place with no problem. One of the pieces that IASB offers is a post search. So once the next superintendent comes on board July 1, within I think it's 6 months, within 6 months, but boards typically do it sooner, is a new superintendent board workshop, a complimentary workshop with IASB. I can say as a new superintendent, when I came up to the suburbs, it was my first superintendency. There had been some board turnover, and it was really invaluable to have that. A board can have that at any time, but it's typically for a cost. But because if you go with us, it's a complimentary, it can be up to 4 hours, and it's absolutely tremendous. Next slide, please. So I told you that there were 5 optional pieces, and that we were recommending, and I'm sorry, the spacing for some reason got a little off on this one, but I'm not sure why, but that's okay. You can still read it. The piece about us doing the face-to-face screening interviews of the top candidates, because it's 2 of us and it's a 1,500, it's 2 of us for a full day. So it's 1,500 per consultant. So that additional piece is 3,000. And the piece about having us facilitate the stakeholders, that would involve just 1 of us. So that's an additional 1,500. So that's where you get the additional 4,500 on top of the standard fee. Forgot to mention that standard fee, listed back on the earlier page, is based on enrollment, and it is not being increased. It's not been increased for a couple of years. So that is, it's just based on school enrollment. But as I said, you could also add, and you might want to also add, if you were interested, I should say, we could add the in-district focus groups, which would be the first box. And that would be 3,000 because 2 of us would be needed to facilitate that. No pressure to, obviously, for any of these, just thoughts, considerations, and recommendations. Brandon? Oh, I'm sorry. Before you move that one on, Brandon. Yes, sir.
So the second one that's checked.
Yes.
Is the stakeholders with the 2 finalists.
The second one checked, which is the 3rd box down, yes, is the finalists, or some people call them the semifinalists because you haven't chosen, but you know what I mean. Yes, the final 2 or 3, correct.
That is included in the 13,000 that is checked.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it is.
And
yes,
then-
it is.
Right. And then the reference checking. So the one that's not included is the feedback, the early on feedback with
The early on feedback that would supplement the survey. That's
Right.
exactly right, Mr. Anderson. If you wanted us to have groups where sometimes in the community, there are 2 or 3 nights where you say, we'll come, and then we do our thing, we do our process. So sometimes it's kind of an open forum. Sometimes you'll say 1 night is for teachers, 1 night is for parents and community. So there are different ways to set that up, but you're correct. That one is not calculated in at this time.
That would be 3,000, so it'd be 16.
16.4. That's exactly right.
That also is kind of a function of how you as a board know your community, your stakeholders, and their willingness to provide input through a survey. If you feel that a survey is sufficient,
Right.
then that's fine.
Yeah,
On
we can make the survey a little more robust to get a lot of information from a lot of people, whereas we can do kind of a more of the basic survey, but then really get some in-depth information with the face-to-face. Sorry, I'll go ahead.
Open comments, an open comment section on the survey itself, although we always tell boards that you have to be careful what you ask for in an open comment section, because sometimes it's a fair game.
Get some good
However,
comments.
it can provide you and us, some valuable input if you choose. Otherwise, the survey itself is basically it's not scientific, but it's a real simple way of gathering input through prioritizing and yes, no questions and so on.
And you can keep it anonymous, so.
Oh, absolutely.
It is anonymous.
Comfortable.
It is anonymous, yes. And we send you the link, but we receive the survey data and we do the summarizing. So it comes to us, we filter, we put the data together and bring it and report it to you. Yeah, great question.
One other
Please.
comment about the interviewing stage. If we do the initial interviews of, let's say, 10 to 12 candidates that we feel are the strongest, narrow that down to that slate of 6. We really feel that it's important for the board only to do those initial interviews with that slate.
Right.
The more people you involve, the more everybody's going to like somebody, and it's harder to come to consensus. As a board, those initial interviews of that slate of 6, let's say, you should be doing the interviewing. When that's narrowed down to, let's say, 2 or 3 finalists, and then the stakeholders and whomever else you might want to have in that part of the process, and we can help facilitate and coordinate that, then you broaden the input in terms of the finalists at that point. But as a board, we think it's important for you only to be doing those initial interviews.
I think that's an important point. I appreciate you saying that, because I'll just add on to that and say that it has become sitting superintendents have become increasingly conscious, mindful of, and requesting confidentiality as far into the process as possible. These have been difficult times. I don't know if this is true or not. I haven't actually seen the article, but one of the experienced IASB folks from a different division said she was reading an article that said actually in the United States right now, superintendent is the most stressful job, even more so than doctors. And it's because of the stress of the pandemic that we're hopefully starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel. But with that said, there are many superintendents requesting of us, I don't want my current board notified until and unless I reach the finals, because and we all know the why. I see heads nodding, and that I don't want to burn any bridges. I don't want to leave a bad taste. I'm happy where I am. I'm not in trouble. I don't have to leave, but I sure don't want them thinking I don't want to be there. So that's another reason that there's an expectation of privacy, and that's part of what we'll talk about when we kind of do the in-servicing with you, until and unless they make it to the finals. On the right side of your folder is a tentative timeline, and I think it's about 2/3 or farther back, maybe closer to 3/4 of the way back, but it looks like this, and it's on the right side. And I'm hoping it's there. Are you finding it? Oh, good. Someone is. So that's. There you go. That's it. Yep. We typically do this, provide a sample. Sometimes it's just a sort of a blank to be determined kind of sample. And sometimes when we have the opportunity, we really think about your district, look at your board meetings, because what happens is it's a very involved process and it's nuanced, which is why you want probably will want help with it. And that's what we're here for. But on your part, it does take time. And you cannot avoid a number of special board meetings. So first round interviews are special board meetings where you go right into executive session, closed session, and that's where you do first round. And second round interviews are closed sessions. So if you think about 6 candidates and an hour each with time in between, that's 2 or 3 evenings or a very long Saturday. Then if you think about the night of the finals, and we create, if you want to do the stakeholder piece, which again, we recommend, but it's totally up to you. You create a stair-step schedule where candidate A is with us from say 6 to 7, and with the board from 7:15 to 8:15, and you stair-step the candidates that way, the 2 or 3 finalists. My point being, it's a lot of time on your part. So if some of the pieces we can incorporate into an already scheduled board meeting, and it's not always possible, but when we can do that, it sure saves you having 2 or 3 other special board meetings. So I've looked at your fall schedule and putting some of these dates in. But you can see that, we really would recommend that you start as soon as possible, say July, August. Here's really the bottom line. We start with the end in mind. So I made an assumption with this. We start with, when would you like to have this person named? Because we put that dot on the calendar and then we work back with all the things that need to happen. So I should clarify and say, this is coming from the assumption of what a lot of districts want, not all, but what a lot want when they have a year of notification. And that is, they would love to have the next person named mid-year, say January-ish. That allows for time for cross-training with the current sitting superintendent, time for them to come to some board meetings, start to get their feet wet, have some meetings with staff, maybe come to some in-service days. And I'm thinking of the things that occurred when my successor was named in January, and those kinds of things occurred over that second semester of the school year. So that was the assumption I made. And you can see from the third to the bottom piece says January, board negotiates and offers contract and appoints superintendent. If that's the assumption, then this would be the kind of timeline with some tweaks here and there that we would recommend. So I saw that you have a board meeting July 20th. And so a critical piece after the surveys are done, the board surveys and the community surveys, is us synthesizing those and developing the announcement of vacancy, bringing it to you, sharing the survey results, showing you the announcement of vacancy, and you guys okaying it. And usually there's some things where I say, hey, look, I noticed that there wasn't agreement on let's say previous superintendent experience or doctorate required. So 4 of you said one thing, 3 of you said another thing, or same, 50-50 in the response from the community. So let's talk about that and come to consensus. So often there are some things we need to like tweak when we present that. That could be done potentially at the July meeting, but it could be done also at the August meeting, particularly if you would like to have some of those in-district face-to-face focus groups. But essentially, let's say a fall and October-ish kind of closing date, then we need time to analyze those applications, do the face-to-face screening interviews, if that's something that was an optional piece, if that's something that you agree to. We bring the slate to you, and I was looking again at a board meeting you already had scheduled on October 26th. Those are presented in closed session. And then you would have November, December to do first and second round interviews, gives you some wiggle time in there if there's a delay or snow or something comes up, but with the goal of being hopefully having the person named and announced by January-ish. Next slide, please. So I would just point out a couple of things. Number one, we do more searches than others who do searches in Illinois. So some districts do their own search. And of the districts who utilize someone to help them find a superintendent, we do more than the competitive firms. And I will just say the for-profit firms charge more. And this is a service to our member districts. So we're not out to make a profit. We're out to cover our expenses. So we do fantastic quality work. I know I'm biased, but we don't, why would that be? Sometimes people say, well, if you pay more, you must be getting more. Well, if they're private, they're for profit. And so that's really a big part of the difference.
We also find that our pool of candidates that we are working with is the same pool of candidates that a for-profit firm would likely draw if they were doing a search. And it's the same candidates that are applying.
Couple of final things. Those are retention rates for the last 5 years. If you go back 5 years, superintendents we helped place in 2016-17, 80% of them are still in the same job and working on up from there. The statement of assurance and guarantee of services I want to mention very, very briefly. One is if for whatever reason you're not happy with the slate of candidates or something goes awry, the finalist you want to offer it to has some catastrophic event and withdraws, or their spouse gets a dream job in Australia, or something happens, you never have to settle. And what I mean by that is we will relaunch, we'll completely do a whole new search, or we'll go back to the candidates who applied. We will work with you for no additional dollars. Even if we completely start the search over, we'll work with you for this contracted amount until you have a superintendent you are happy with. And the guarantee of services is if, for whatever reason, the person whom you hire leaves within a year, and it could be your choice, it could be their choice, it could be, again, something unforeseen and unusual. If they leave within a year for any reason, we will redo the search for no additional cost, for no additional money. And I think those other things have been touched on. I think that's it, Brandon. Yep. So what questions do you have?
Okay.
Okay, so hearing none, and I think, Mr. Johnson, you alluded to this, we always bring the contract with the, oh, yes, good, thank you.
I may be mistaken, but on this paper that you gave us, I've got two options selected here, but I think they were different up there. The options that you suggested for us was that the two ISB consultants conduct screening interview of top potential candidates, and also it was to facilitate in-district stakeholder group interviews. Was that correct? Is that what you had?
No, the in-district is, I'll have to look at it. Sometimes they're worded similarly. I will make sure, I'll just need to look at it. Sometimes they call the in-district stakeholder the same for the upfront one, and it's worded similarly for the, which one?
Well, this one is X. I didn't see that as an option up there. So I just wanted to know if this one was
You know
up
what?
there.
That was an error, and I apologize. There's one that says, and I am completely sorry that I did not catch that. Our administrative assistant prepared this. Thank you for catching that. So it's not on the contract.
I would like to know more about that, actually. just
About the
because-
training interview with board?
And I just want to
Okay.
get the board's opinion on it, because
Okay.
we do have newer board members, myself included. And so I wonder if, obviously, as we're thinking through this, right, these are all just options, but if that particular option would be advantageous to this group as far as training sessions for, the mock interviews. Well, what do you all think?
I think it's a great idea because I can't speak for others, but I know I've never interviewed a superintendent before. I've hired other people, but not a superintendent.
So maybe, although we are never pleased to see that our administrator assistant and we have not communicated clearly, or she, missed something, perhaps it was a blessing in disguise because it's allowing us to discuss it. That is essentially a mock interview practice training session that we come in and do with the board. And I don't know, Al, do you want to say any more about that? And I did not mark it because it's not one that's used as much. It's just not one that's requested a lot. But when boards want it and we provide it, they're really happy that they did.
And especially if there are newer board members.
And it's been a long time since you've hired a superintendent.
What we do with that is we have a bank of about 200 questions that can be incorporated into your interview process, but we would work with you in helping to determine what questions you would want to include in your initial interviews, what questions you would want to include in your final interviews. We serve as maybe the candidates and we give you responses. And sometimes boards forget that they're also being interviewed by the candidates, because candidates, especially for a good district like this, it's going to draw experienced candidates who are interested. They're shopping around in a sense, because they're going to be wanting to see, okay, am I a good fit for you? And are you as a board a good fit for me? So they're basically kind of interviewing you in the same.
We're
way.
interviewing
So we
and
help-
selling at the same time.
Right,
That's
and we-
exactly
and we help
right.
Boards prepare for that and know what kinds of questions those candidates might be asking of you, because you don't want to be on the spot not knowing how to respond to a candidate's question. So we kind of give you some ideas that they may be wanting to talk about when they're given the opportunity to ask questions too. So it's kind of a two-way learning process there. So
So just looking around from heads nodding, does that seem something that we'd be interested in?
I have
Tony?
a question. But that's not the only way we would get sample questions.
oh, no, you
And
get the
I-
questions anyway.
I was actually
yeah.
just going to say that there's a little bit of almost a flip side. So it is a great experience and opportunity if the board, decides it would like to do that. We do provide a great deal of information about preparing for and conducting the first and second round interviews.
If that's the case.
Do's, don'ts, legal considerations, protocols, all sorts of tips, as well as a bank of 200 questions, about 200 questions categorized by area. But then we encourage you, and the difference between first round questions and second round questions, how they should be asked, forms for you, 2 sample forms to record and sort of you folks rate and analyze candidates. So we provide a lot of information that helps you prepare. What it doesn't do is an actual mock interview. And so that is the difference.
Tony and John, have you both gone through this process before?
I have, and I'm actually, and I'm fine if other people feel there's value in it. I'm actually comfortable not going through that particular part of the process. provided we get enough guidance, sample questions.
So based on what you two think and what you've gone through in the sample questions, do you think that's something we would need, or you think that's enough that we can, I don't want to say figure out on our own, but
Or you could even
Here's-
help guide us through that since you've been through it before. So
Here's something I would add.
questions.
And thank you, Mr. Mulby just reminded me of this, that if you decided you would like to utilize IASB to assist with this process, some of the optional pieces do not have to be decided tonight. So you could say, we know we want us to do the screening interviews, which we would recommend. We know you would like to facilitate the stakeholder piece with the finalists at the end. We're not sure about the mock interview piece. You can decide and add that at a later date.
So here's what I'd suggest to the
offering
board then,
that.
because there's a lot of things to think about right now, and this is a new process to most of us. I like what you said. Let's kind of, for tonight, go forward with what they've recommended, but keep in mind some of the other options, and let's bring that up in another meeting to say, hey, you know what, the more I thought about it, maybe the mock interviews would be good, or maybe the first option on the supplemental survey sounds good. I don't want to get bogged down in those conversations right now. I'd rather just, let's talk about the main drive, so we can get this process moving. You had mentioned very early on, you thought this timeline fit our needs. That was kind of a question, but I think you know the answer to it, that yes, we're kind of interested in moving along. So if that's okay with you guys.
I just would interject, what's nice about what you've just proposed is it gives them time to think and call you or send you an email. Really think about a couple of the other options. Do we like them or not? You could always loop back at another meeting and then contact me. Hey, we would like to add X, Y, Z. And if nothing else is added, that's great too.
And you get close to the end of the process where it's almost interview time.
Yep.
We've given you that material, questions and so on.
Right.
If at that point you think you'd like to maybe add a mock interview session, then we could just add that on.
That's right.
That sounds great.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
We know it's a financial decision. As retired superintendents, we realize this is a fiscal decision on your part. And, you know, like Dr. Vineyard said, we're significantly less than any of the for-profit firms. You already pay to be a part of the association. And so that helps to defray some of the cost. Our job is to make it a process that works for you all the way through the beginning of your next superintendency, because we add that field service training session in there as a part of it, because we want you to be successful in this.
Yeah, I appreciate you pointing out that it is a, a fiscal consideration, but the other hand too, it's a once in a long time opportunity for us. I want to make sure we take advantage of all our resources. too.
Right.
So with that being said, I just have a question for John and Tony, and I absolutely love what we saw here. I'm just asking, just obviously because we want to think about everything, but since you two have been through it before, did you go through ISB or did you go through a staffing agency, and how was your experience?
So the two that I've been through were both with outside agencies. And in one of those two, we had a very bad experience and we didn't hire anyone. And that's when Mary Perry Bates became superintendent, because she had the certification, all that. So the candidates were not, were not acceptable. So we just went with her, which is why we did one in 12 and another one in 15, because Mary Perry Bates did it for 3 years. And then went with an outside firm, and that's when we hired Dr. Algram. And it was a good experience. We did do the stakeholder interviews with the finalists. We did that, and we actually had them make a video for us to explain why they wanted to come to Warren. That was just something we threw in at the last minute. I don't know why, but it was, and that was a good experience. But, even 7 years ago, that cost us about 20 grand. 7 years ago. 20 grand. So today that would be 25, maybe, I don't know, something like that.
We usually find that our total cost tends to be half, 2/3 or even half what a for-profit firm is charging them.
They don't
And,
go
you
up
know,
with-
and they're good firms, but at
Yeah.
the same time,
Yeah.
like I said, we're drawing the same pool of candidates, and it's a money decision on your part. We know that, and our goal is to make it a quality money decision.
And the district has used IASB before, and that was when they hired Dr. Sobosinski, who was the superintendent up until Mary Perry Bates took over. And he was a great superintendent, worked out fabulously. I wasn't part of that process, but that did work out just as well as Dr. Alden did. So, I mean, so it works. You know, from my standpoint, I think the process would be just as good with the IASB and cost half as much. So,
Tony, just
Tony.
curious as to yours.
Zero concerns. In fact, I would almost prefer to go with IASB from the get-go as per last meeting. For all the reasons that were mentioned, I think the fairness of the process is the biggest one that I see as a difference between some of the private firms as compared to IASB. It's a small crowd. They all know each other. All these superintendents, both retired, current, know each other. And it is
of course, they're not hard to find.
no, it's all the same pool. And the people that are aspiring superintendents or current superintendents go to all of the sites and apply. It doesn't matter what the firm is. So to me, this is a good process. It's a fair process. We're already paying for the service. I think ultimately it's our decision and we have to take responsibility for that decision. So it's not going to be the firm at the end of the day. It's who we hire. Board takes responsibility for ourselves. So we just have to choose wisely. If they draw attention and bring in the candidates, and we'll have some hopefully well-qualified external candidates and maybe even some well-qualified internal candidates. And then we just apply a fair process. And we have to feel very comfortable as the community representatives who we end up hiring, because we're going to have to be responsible for that. So zero concerns. The only question I had, I actually had sent to Paul, but I wasn't sure if is just from, it's more of a process question because I just don't know.
Okay.
But did we have to go out to bid for this type of service, or do we have the purview to just select a organization? That
You do not have to go out to
I would
bid
assume
for
you guys
for a
would know, but
superintendent
because in
search.
many districts, we would say, give us your bids, and we might see the 3 or 4 or 2 or 3, firms that would apply. You would come out cheapest, we'd make a decision, but I just didn't know if that was a legal requirement for us to do
Great
that.
question. Important
Of course,
to know.
I'm getting the answer from the firm that wants our business, but I would assume you would also.
I would still give you the legal correct answer.
Yeah, well,
You
because
do
you're on
not-
record.
You do not have to
so,
bid.
Yeah, but no, I'm sure you would too. But so that was my only question, was really that. So I hope that answers it.
Oh, definitely. And thank you. I just wanted to, I'm just curious. I wanted to hear your feedback, and
No, I haven't done
agree.
it for warrants, so I'm not familiar with anything that was
Yeah.
just mentioned. So
I get it.
okay.
Mhm.
Board, any other questions?
Do we all agree we're going to vote on this or what?
Okay, so we're not voting on it now, but at the appropriate part of the agenda, we're going to have a time to vote on it.
Great.
Okay.
So if that's later in the meeting, a couple of things, I can wait and have you sign. So if you're going to vote on it later, it will be, the agreement's activated when you sign it and I get it back to our boss. I can leave this with you and Ms. Love can scan it. There's 2 copies that will be in, one for the district and one for us. Or I don't mind waiting until later in the meeting. So
It's up to you, your preference.
okay. I don't know how much more you have on the agenda.
A lot.
We got a pretty meaty agenda
I'm
tonight.
going to leave the contracts with you. I'm gonna leave them with you. And I thank you so much for your time. I hope we didn't take too much time, but as you pointed out, it's an important process.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your time tonight. Like a bad Agatha Christie novel. Every topic comes up, more people leave. God.
Question 2 is,
Usually after we sign contract, we go ahead and start to post it as a vacancy, even though we don't have the announcement vacancy together yet.
So question, so when we communicate with you, obviously you can't communicate with all 7 of us. So would you, one per,
Usually the board, president board, but that's. And Trish will be.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
That is the end of the president's report.
Long presidents.
Next up is committee reports.
Thank you. We did have 3 committee meetings since our last board meeting. We had a finance committee meeting on June the 8th. Thanks to the board for your participation in that finance committee. And I know for the board, you remember that we reviewed the April 6th referendum results, looked at the associated cuts currently with the referendum that did not pass, as well as our overall financial situation. The board and the board started, and then the community weighed in on some of the perspectives as to why the referendum question didn't receive enough votes, how they were impacted by the reductions, and thoughts on future referendum questions. So there's also a corresponding action item related to this topic tonight in old business for the board. We had a policy committee meeting on June 15th. The committee reviewed a draft policy regarding graduation requirements that will also have a corresponding action item in new business. And then following that meeting, we had a food service committee on June 15th. Our friends from Quest Food Management joined us, and we discussed food service options for next year and the district's opportunity to take advantage of a federally funded seamless summer meal program during the school year. There's a corresponding action item for the board in new business based on those committees' actions. And that is all the committee reports.
Thank you. On to the superintendent's report.
All right, superintendent's report for the board's review. We do have the monthly reports from the month of May that are in there, and I'm going to turn it over, I believe, to Dr. Engel, who's going to give us our treasurer's report for May.
Good evening, everybody. Next slide, please. Okay, I wanted to do the fund balance breakdown of kind of where we're at as of the end of May. This is as of May 31st. Our current balance is $19.9 million. You take out debt service, which is negative $250,000 right now, brings the total to $20.2 million. Take out capital projects, which is negative $700,000 at this time, brings it to $20.9 million. Of that remaining portion, what's available and our fund balance is $10.9 million. That's as of the end of May. However, that's not our low point for the end of May. It was actually $9.3 million, which brings it down to a 13.2% fund balance ratio. And ISB, the State Board of Education, recommends a minimum of 25%. That's at our lowest point. You can see right there at the end of the month was at 15.8. And again, for comparisons, this was brought up in the Finance Committee meeting. This is 12 years ago. The district had just over $57 million. Subtract out debt service and capitalized projects. There's $25.6 million available, which it accounts for almost 50.2%. This just kind of goes to show that over the years, we have been reducing and using our fund balances to pay for operations and are currently in need of an influx of revenue. Next slide. This shows you, again, where that orange kind of reddish line is the 25% ISB recommendation levels. The numbers there on the left-hand side that are in yellow are previous points at low spot end of month by year. So you can kind of see for the first 2 years there in 2011, 2012, we were actually following ISB recommended guidelines. And since then we have not. The current year is right there in green. You can see that's our low point. That's as of end of May. As I had just mentioned before, our actual low point was May 11th. It was $9.3 million. The blue highlighted ones are projected going forward, and that's all the way through 2030. Next slide. All right, next slide. All right, as of right now, total cash on hand is $19.9 million. Total revenues year to date are $45.483 million. Expenditures are $51.499. Next slide. Hard to read. Right now, this is for all of the account, like all revenues year to date. Right now, we're projected at 71.89%. We do have an influx of money coming in from the county, typically here at the end of June. Right now, we're at 75.48. Local sources, we're at 69.13. And actual year-to-date state sources, we're at 91.02. Next slide. On the expense side, we're projected right now to be at 84.91. We're at 83.08. On actual year-to-date salaries and benefits, we're at 80.2%. And all other objects, including special ed and bond payments, we're at 90, almost exactly 90. It's 90.02%. Next slide. You can see this is our monthly kind of cash flow. Our current year is there in the blue. You'll notice that there's been a lot of change, specifically in the month of April and month of May, as these are projections and they will change throughout the year. But right now, the ending, it looks just slightly a little bit better than where we were last year at this time. But that's subject to change depending on our next disbursement here from Lake County. Next slide. This is our fund balance for ending May 31st. As you can see, for the month of May, we brought in $3.4 million and spent 5.4. So we're upside down by about $2 million for the month. Next slide. This is year-to-date revenue and year-to-date expenditures. As you can see, revenues came in at 49.6 million and expenditures at 58.97 so far. And again, as I will reiterate, there are tax obligations and tax revenue coming in from the county as we speak. Any questions? Thank you.
Also, for the board's information, we just make sure the board is aware that every August, the Village of Grenique puts out a Keeping Posted joint newsletter. So we're preparing, tentatively preparing articles for that will represent District 121. Obviously, we've generally included our Teacher of the Year in an article about that. We obviously will also provide some information about the referendum vote and what the impact of those reductions on the district. So it's an opportunity for us to put some of our most important pieces in. It's cost the district about $2,500 to $3,000 annually, but obviously that's well worth the investment. I think people do look for that annual kind of publication because all the taxing bodies are kind of in there together. Also, next week, we hope to have our June edition of our Warren Connection out to our community, and some of the things that we're talking about tonight or the board will be voting on, we hope to capture in that Warren Connection, as well as in parent letters next week. Mr. Gio Karis, I think we're going to go to the next slide there, Brandon, if you would. Thank you. Chris has some exciting news for us. This is getting to be really great news.
For our next meeting, let's turn this thing around so we can look this way.
And do whatever.
We were notified in May that once again, we were recognized by the U.S. News and World Report's best high schools for 2021. So we were ranked, as you can see up there, we were ranked 2,943rd nationally and number 109 in Illinois. So it's been consistently over a decade when these awards have come out. They've floated between Washington Post, Newsweek, U.S. News and World Report, but we've consistently earned that recognition since about 2010. It's been determined on a variety of factors. So the U.S. News and World Report is based on that recognition isn't just on test scores. It's determined based on math and reading proficiency, college readiness indicators of graduating seniors, student performance in specific demographic subgroups, advanced coursework offerings, and our 4-year graduation rate. So it's not just simply how did your kids do on AP tests or on SAT scores, but it's a variety of factors that way into it. So that's why it's a fantastic recognition for the excellent work being done by our staff and our students. So this ranking, I'll just put it in context, puts us in the top 83% of schools earning this award and in the top 8% of schools in the nation.
Is that similar to where we have been? I would assume.
It is very similar. So usually we're in the top 4 to 7 or 8% in nationally.
Brenda, can you go to the next slide, please? You know, one thing I did want to share with the board, and generally speaking too, in education, we're really not, and we're supportive of everybody providing good education for all students, right? And we generally don't get in the game of comparisons, but I did want to make sure the board took some pride in the fact, and probably a little bit to reiterate what you were highlighting earlier, Mr. Schultz, about the fact that, this against those 10 Lake County high school districts, right, that are kind of on that page, and all the school districts on our high school districts in Lake County, we're proud of. We think we all do good work. We're proud of all of our students, but we just thought it was interesting that when we kind of look through where everybody was ranked on there, granted, we're not at the top of the list, but there's a lot of the, very wealthy resource districts in our area, and we know that, and we've acknowledged that, generally speaking, there's some districts in there that, have a lot more resources than we do, but there's also a lot of districts on that sheet that are getting more revenue per student annually from us, significantly different in some cases, and we're still, in regards to our ranking, kind of in the middle of that pack, right, at our 109 there, and we kind of average, when there was 2 schools in those cases, we just averaged their scores to kind of place them somewhere on the pack. My point is only that, we do have to highlight the fact that we really have done a great job over the decades, giving a good bang for the buck that we have. So it is and there's other information like this. If you remember on the referendum pieces, we did put some of the slides on our website that had to do with our English and math scores, because that was a natural question people would ask. Sure, but how are you? We'd show our revenue compared to those 10 high school districts, but some people were interested. Well, academically though, how are you comparing? Well, we're not at the bottom of that list. We're in the middle of those lists, and they're all good, but we didn't want to, just for informational purposes, just share that with the board, that when we found out the ranks of all those schools which were available, that's kind of where we sat, even with the lowest revenue per student by far of that group. So one other little tidbit of fact. All right, thanks, Brandon. Can you go on to the next slide? And I think that's for the superintendent's report. I think that was the last piece of information that I think we needed to share. So I think we're on to consent agenda items.
Sounds good. Thank you. I'm going to go on the assumption there's no changes to the consent agenda. We talked about that earlier on. So I'm going to go ahead and make a motion. I move to approve the consent agenda items as presented, which includes Exhibit A, personnel recommendations, number 77 to 88 as posted. Exhibit B, Appendix B, personnel recommendations, numbers 52B to 65B as posted. The payment of the bills for June 22nd, 2021 in the amount of $4,740,000, $98.89, and approval of the regular meeting minutes of June 8th, 2021.
Second.
By Beals, roll call.
Motion by Schultz, second by Beals. Mr. Anderson,
Yes.
Mr. Demonte,
Same.
Mrs. Blair,
Yes.
Mrs. Martinez,
Yes.
Mrs. Beals, Mr. Schultz.
Yes,
I have 5 yes, 1 abstention. Motion carries.
so much. Brings us on to new business. You want us to take the lead for this, or?
That'd be great.
So we just had a conversation. Thank you, Mr. Anderson, for leading the conversation and getting us started on that. So really, we decided we wanted to move forward, or at least entertain a vote on it. So I don't know if we need much of a conversation at this point. You guys let me know if you want more of a conversation, if we should just move forward with a vote.
I'm ready.
Okay. That being said, then I'll go ahead and make a motion. I move to approve entering into an agreement for superintendent search with executive searches of IASB, subject to review by your law firm. Roll call.
Motion by Schultz, second by Beals. Mrs. Martinez,
Yes.
Mr. Demonte, Mr. Anderson,
Yes.
Mrs. Blair,
Yes.
Mrs. Beals, Mr. Schultz.
Yes.
6 yes, motion carries.
Great. Our next item are facility rates. Annually, we need to bring to the board for approval just rates for rentals for our buildings. We're recommending our rates stay the same going into next year for our class 1, class 2, and class 3 types of charges. We generally cover just the costs we need to in doing that. So we're just recommending we keep our rates the same. They've seemed to work and cover our costs. We do want to make sure, though, that the board is aware that one thing that we also help to start communicating to people is, specifically if we're talking about lack of access of our own students to our programs and facilities eventually, we do want to make sure that over the course of the next year, we clearly communicate to some of the outside groups that have been using our facility that while the rates are the same for the 21-22 school year, they shouldn't be, or tentatively, they should not be counting on anything after that, pending what happens with us getting additional revenue. So we just wanted to make sure that the board understood that will be part of our communication over the next school year as well.
Funny story, kind of funny, but I think that was communicated to some people and people took it that they were going to be cut off this summer. I said, no, it's not this summer. It's next year potentially. But they immediately thought they were being cut off from the school this summer. So whenever we communicate, let's just make sure that the timeline is crystal clear. Okay.
Comments?
Nope.
If not, I move that there is no change in the facility use fee schedule as presented for the 2021-2022 school year.
Second.
Second by Anderson. Roll call.
Motion by Schultz and second by Anderson. Mrs. Blair.
Yes.
Mrs. Martinez.
Yes.
Mrs. Beals. Yes. Mr. Demonte. Mr. Anderson.
Yes.
Mr. Schultz.
Yes.
6 yes, motion carries.
Item C deals with rates for substitutes. This is just my year. I forgot to bring this group of subs who cover leaves of absence to the board back in earlier in the spring. So hopefully next year we'll have this with the other group of sub rate increases that the board approved earlier. It's the same general concept though, just to increase their rates for each of those three groups by $5 a day and keep a very moderate increase each year, which hopefully keeps us competitive. But by the same token, doesn't have us in any given year needing to give huge increases.
Questions by the board? I move to approve the pay rates for the substitute teachers covering leaves for the 2021-22 school year as presented.
Second.
Second by Anderson. Roll call.
Motion by Schultz and second by Anderson. Mr. Demonte? Mrs. Martinez?
Yes.
Mrs. Beals? Yes. Mrs. Blair?
Yes.
Mr. Anderson?
Yes.
Mr. Schultz?
Yes.
6 yes, motion carries.
Next item is for Dr. Engel, I believe. It has to do with interest delegation.
Correct. It's for the approval of the resolution designating interest. This is the earned interest that we've earned throughout the year on several accounts. It's basically asking the Board of Education to give permission to transfer the interest to the educational fund. Any questions?
This is the same thing we traditionally do all years prior.
Yes.
So we can spend the money, not basically.
Yeah.
We have to designate it before we can spend it.
Correct. It needs to be transferred. And this is, I gave you guys a through May 31st and the resolution allows to go through June 30th. So it'll be post audit. We'll transfer the last remaining month of interest earned. So any questions? The amount is $54,973.90.
Questions? I move to approve the resolution of the Board of Education of Warren Township High School District Number 121, Lake County, Illinois, designating interest in the education, operations and maintenance, debt services, transportation, and working cash funds.
Second.
Second by Beals. Roll call.
Motion by Schultz and second by Beals. Mrs. Blair?
Yes.
Mrs. Martinez?
Yes.
Mr. Demonte? Mrs. Beals? Yes. Mr. Anderson?
Yes.
Mr. Schultz?
Yes.
6 yes, motion carries.
Okay, the next resolution is for the approval of the authorized depositories, investment managers, dealers, and brokers in accordance with Board Policy 430, which is attached and is the most recent version of 430. This is something that we do annually, and these are investment banks that we've traditionally done business with over the years. Any questions?
I've got just a general question. There's a lot of different banks on here. Is this typical of a high school this size to have that many different institutions that we use?
This is actually a truncated list. Most high schools have sometimes twice, 3 times the amount of this. Yeah, just depends on honestly who has the best interest rates and when and how they're locked in, correct? And how they, to give you an idea, there's several high schools without naming high schools that are in a much more cash-rich position that can go out 3 to 5 years with investment opportunities that.
Okay. Just seems like a lot to manage, but I'm not managing it, so it's all in good hands. Any questions?
Nope.
I move to approve the list of financial depositories as presented in accordance with Board Policy 4.30, revenue and investments.
Second.
Second by Martinez. Roll call.
Motion by Schultz and second by Martinez. Mr. Demonte,
Yes.
Mr. Anderson,
Yes.
Mrs. Beals,
Yes.
Mrs. Blair,
Yes.
Mrs. Martinez,
Yes.
Mr. Schultz,
Yes,
6 yes, motion carries.
thank you.
Next is the diesel fuel bid. We had a bid back on May the 25th. We had multiple diesel fuel vendors come out. The low apparent bidder was Avalon at a at a price of 10 cents over the index. Last year's delivery charge was 11.9 cents. This year's is 10. It was actually a pretty decent turnout. We were hoping for 1 or 2 more, but I want to say that we had 3 this year actually return and submit bids, where in previous years we've had 4 or 5. Any questions on the fuel delivery?
Move to approve the diesel fuel bid and award Avalon Petroleum as presented for the 2021-2022.
Second.
Second by Martinez. Roll call.
Motion by Schultz, second by Martinez. Mr. Anderson,
Yes.
Mrs. Blair,
Yes.
Mr. Demonte, Mrs. Beals,
Yes.
Mrs. Martinez,
Yes.
Mr. Schultz,
Yes,
6 yes, motion carries.
Next is the resolution of the abatement of the working cash fund of the capital projects fund. This goes back to our 2018. This is back in November 2018. When we did the working cash bonds for $23 million. This abatement goes from June 24th of 2020 through June 1st of 2021. And the amount that we've expensed in Fund 60 for capitalized projects, this was pretty much the finalization of the solar project with a couple smaller little health, life, safety things that were happening at that time, mostly. And the list is included there for the $968,682.07.
so can you clarify what we're doing? We're moving it from Fund 62. I know it's just kind of procedural, but it'd be good to understand exactly what the
Correct.
procedure is.
That's a great question. And within working cash itself, okay, so this is, just imagine we have bond money and we have our normal working cash money. This kind of goes back to our illustration before, what's available and what's not available.
Right.
The bond money is for specific purposes, hence the solar project, the payment of the land, things of that nature. So what we're doing is we're taking a resolution here by the board. We're taking that $968,682.07 from the bond money and moving it back to capital projects from working cash to pay for itself. That way it can balance out and neutralize and go back to a zero balance in capital projects.
Okay. Any other questions?
Nope.
Move to approve the resolution for the abatement of working cash funds to the capital projects fund in the amount of $968,682.07.
Second.
Second by Martinez. Roll call.
Motion by Schultz and second by Martinez. Mr. Anderson,
Yes.
Mrs. Blair,
Yes.
Mr. Demonte, Mrs. Beals,
Yes.
Mrs. Martinez,
Yes.
Mr. Schultz,
Yes,
6 yes, motion carries.
Another way to kind of clarify that for you is in working cash. There's no expense codes in working cash. There's revenue and transfers. So you can't pay for things out of working cash.
Thank you.
The next item in new business is the approval of a school treasurer. Annually, the board has a responsibility of appointing a treasurer. The treasurer is the only lawful custodian of school funds, is responsible for all receipts, disbursements, investments of school funds, pays orders issued by the board. Illinois School Code requires the treasurer be bonded in an amount equal to 25% of the amount of all bonds, notes, mortgages, monies, and effects of which the treasurer is to have custody. So the bonds from our insurance carrier equal to the amount required by law is attached for the board's review and board docs. They also on my end. I'm recommending to the board that you have Mike Engel continue to as the appointed treasurer of the district and the student activity treasurer. And a copy of that form, as I mentioned, is in the board docs.
Board. I move that Michael A. Engel to be appointed school treasurer for school district funds and as the school treasurer for school activity funds. Further, I move to approve and accept the treasurer's bond for the treasurer of the district in the amount sufficient to meet the Illinois School Board Code.
Second.
Second by Beals. Roll call.
Motion by Schultz and second by Beals. Mr. Anderson,
Yes.
Mrs. Martinez,
Yes.
Mr. Demonte,
Yes.
Mrs. Blair,
Yes.
Mrs. Beals, Mr. Schultz.
Yes.
6 yes, motion carries.
Next item on our agenda, I think I need Mr. Geocaris to come to the podium. And I just want to make sure that Chris jumps in with anything that I don't necessarily say correctly. But we do have a recommendation by the board regarding our graduation requirements. We talked about this at the policy meeting, as I mentioned earlier. We also talked about it at a finance meeting. And so we are recommending a reduction of our graduation requirements from 22.5 to 18.5 for all students, starting with our class of 2022 and moving forward. There's a couple of number of reasons why we think it's right decision that I just want to make sure we highlight. For the great majority of our students, this won't matter one bit because they've, we looked at some data that 82 or 83% of our students are earning well above our graduation requirements, regardless what we set them, because they're worried about obviously taking as many credits as they can to enrich their transcript, and they will still have the opportunity to do so. The last 2 years, what we saw during COVID with our graduating classes is the reduction when we went to 19 actually helped a number of students that were struggling get to graduation, and that's ultimately what we want is for students to successfully graduate. Some students may eventually start to use this as an earlier exit from Warren or a reduced schedule, which case you still need administrative approval for students to do that, but they may allow them to do some other things outside of here, which is good, and we should support those choices as well. And financially, over time, while this reduction won't make an immediate impact on our staffing, it will over time if students are, if we don't have too many excess requirements, it certainly will have a slight decline in our staffing needs, which financially we need. And so finally, I just want to say that the 18.5 isn't it is a number that means a lot to us in a way of the 22.5. If we went on an 8-period day, if we go to a 7-period day, we would naturally reduce our requirements by 4 credit hours anyway. And so going to 18.5, hopefully we won't get there. But if we do, that would be the number that students would be at anyway. So those were the comments we had. And Chris, you want to share any of the data that you had from just ISB or?
So the ISB graduation requirements for a 4-year high school are 16 credits. When you look at the chart that's in board docs, the reason why ours is organized as it is because we list out all of the ISB graduation requirements first. That's why there's one credit for fine and applied arts, and then dropping, then the next line down says 1.5 credits in elective or 1.5 credits in electives. Because ISB requires that 1 credit of fine and applied arts. That's business, industrial tech, fine arts, music. We put world language in that category as well. So that's why those two are separated. So we are still 1.5 credits above the Illinois State Board of Education requirement. As John said, right now with the way what'll happen with the reduction to 18.5 credits is where students right now who are maybe a little bit credit deficient during their senior year, we have more availability, more flexibility in their schedules to help them recover the credits they need to graduate, because we're not changing our requirements in math, English, science, social studies. Those are all still the same, but since they don't need as many elective credits, we now have more opportunities during the school day to put them in, to get them into credit recovery classes, so we can get them able to graduate on time with their peers.
Out of curiosity, how is this 18.5 credits graduation compared to other high schools around us?
We know that right now our 22.5 Grant High School was at 17. I know Zion Benton High School is looking at reducing their graduation credits down similarly to what we're looking at doing. Other than that, schools are all over the place, 20, 22, 23, just kind of depends on the district. But when we look at the amount of revenue we have per pupil and what we're able to do with that, if there's an opportunity for us, if we have students that want to move on from high school, we can provide them the opportunity to do so, and also will help our students graduate on time, which is good for our students.
Right, it would raise our ratio.
Questions? I move to approve the first and final reading of District Board Policy 6.300, graduation requirements at D121 as presented.
Second.
Second by Anderson. Roll call.
Motion by Schultz and second by Anderson. Mr. Demonte,
Yes.
Mrs. Martinez,
Yes.
Mrs. Beals, Mrs. Blair,
Yes.
Mr. Anderson,
Yes.
Mr. Schultz.
Yes,
6 yes, motion carries.
thank you.
Next item for the board's consideration has to do with our food program for next year. We at our food service committee meeting, we reviewed a couple things with Quest Food Management, very important decision for us for the next school year. You know, one of the things we said at the meeting was one of the reasons that we, in a normal time frame, we really like Quest is because they do for our kids, which lunch means a whole lot to them. They do provide a great choice. They provide fresh food. They make things on the spot. It's great. It's great for kids, and we've liked working with them. But by the same token, we were, you know, after this last year, we just started thinking through there's maybe other options, because there's a federally funded program that will allow our kids to get free lunch next year, all of them, just, you know, similar to ways that other, some students may get that. This would be something that's available just for next school year for all of our students. So we wade through at our committee meeting trying to, and Quest was great about coming up with some ideas in which they could still provide some options and still meet the dietary requirements that are part of, you know, a free breakfast or free lunch program. And so we were happy that they were kind of thinking with some, you know, some foresight with us. And we were, you know, on our end, we also talked a lot about the fact that, you know, for our families, it's, you know, it's kind of important that if we can find a way to get them free lunch for this year, that's a good thing, generally speaking. And although the choices might not be as great as they normally are, it's something that we definitely want to go towards. That's one piece of it, is just kind of free lunch. The second piece of it is we still at this point in time aren't totally sure what our delivery system is going to be, because we're not totally sure what lunch is going to look like yet. We know that we've had, you know, we know that going this at the end of this year, 6 feet apart was the rule in the cafeteria. And there's been a lot of talk about what the mandates will be or won't be, but we still have, there still is a possibility that we will be not in traditional kind of lunchroom type settings. And if that's true, our delivery system was going to change anyway, because there's no way we could have been able to do what we were doing based on those criteria. So we reviewed it, and we think Quest is going to, you know, work well with us to try to do the best they can. But this point in time, because it is different, we wanted to make sure that we formally brought to the board an approval to go with the seamless summer, which is just for a 1 year. It's kind of a free lunch and free breakfast program for our kids.
So you're saying that as a parent, we're not going to go online to our lunch account and deposit money every month or every week or however each individual family does it.
No, even though they're still, they may eventually be able to work out where students can buy food in addition to a lunch or in place of a lunch. Like there's still, what we're still working through are some of the details of if students don't want that lunch.
Right, like say someone wants organic milk versus regular milk.
Right, if they want that, there still will be items for sale.
Sure.
But we also don't want to necessarily overpromise what their options will be too, right? So there's a couple of things that will work, and generally there will be a standard meal or choice of meals that they have to take 3 of the 5 required items and all those kinds of things to make the meal a legitimate meal.
No pizza?
What's it?
They may actually have pizza. It just won't be every day. There's a rotating 21-day menu.
I'm gonna strike if there's no pizza, I'll tell you right now.
And this is for both campuses?
Correct.
We also, there is differences between our campuses, meaning that here at Almond, we haven't yet, even though we've talked about it, we haven't yet cut lunch periods down into 22-minute blocks, whereas Eau Plaine, that's not, they do that already for at least their freshmen and some of their sophomores, or they've talked about it, but those are all the logistical things that make it, really just different at both campuses. And yet we don't even know what the state's going to require us to do. We've talked about even last year or at the end of last year, we were talking about having people eat in here, eat in the field house, eat in the gyms, because for that many kids that come through lunch, if you have to be 6 feet apart, it's not that easy to just obviously be how we always have been. So Quest is aware that they're going to have to be flexible based on where we need to serve from and all those kinds of things. And they may, or in terms of kids buying on their own or, having those point of sale kind of registers somewhere else, all that will probably be worked out relatively soon.
What about like during the nice months, letting them go out on the lawn?
During the nice months?
Right, during the nice months? Or is that something that is too risky?
I don't know. Mr. Parrott we've actually talked about, just for the board's awareness, we've talked about from the beginning of this, there were some schools that were able to, purchase larger tents and have them outside just as an eating area. And so those are still things that we still think about. In fact, we are purchasing, we have use for them anyway, but we purchased some more testing tables. Part of our rationale for that was we may need them immediately for lunch tables, for individual lunch tables. If not, they also provide great use for us at both campuses in regards to testing and other needs. So they're multi-purpose well beyond COVID, but we're immediately thinking that that's still up in the air a little bit for us. It's still up in the air for schools, as far as I know, is what they're doing with lunch seating.
Absolutely. The other part is the logistical part, as Dr. Algerman had mentioned, is this eliminates the kind of congested, crowded parts where kids are checking out, trying to go through a cashier. And now, especially with the truncated, reduced times over at Eau Plaine, 22 minutes, this is going to be much quicker getting kids through and getting them to eat lunch. So
What's the cost impact to us?
there is no cost. Well, I'm going to take that back really quick. The first month, everything's 100% reimbursable. So we'll have, the first month we'll have money going out, but we'll also have money coming back in. And then in the final month, it'll be money just coming back in. So it's a zero net cost to the district. And also, in researching it further and reaching out to the Illinois State Board of Education with the funding and disbursements division, because I was on the fence for a little while of what would this do with this, all of a sudden, this huge influx of federal money coming in for our lunch service, if you will. Will this help reduce our position for our evidence-based funding? Would we move further away from tier 1 into tier 2 further or not? And this has no bearing on our evidence-based funding position, if you will. So, and I still don't have an answer if we've moved yet, but that won't be until about September.
The one negative financially, the one negative thing that we talked about, even though we never really took it in as significant of a factor, is we annually were getting about $140,000 a year from that, from our just Quest gives us a certain percentage of the, sales that they make.
That was our revenue.
That was our revenue, but the but we also know that part of the, of that, some of it, we always had to buy equipment for. And so,
Smaller equipment, things.
it may be that there was even if half of that went back towards equipment, and let's just say a $70,000, lack of revenue, if you will, but, a certain degree, it's also an opportunity to provide all of our students and families with free food for all next year. And, it's good. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
No, thank you.
thanks, Mike.
Any other questions from the board? If not, I move to approve the district's participation in the U.S. Department of Agriculture's Seamless Summer Option Food Service Program model for the 2021-2022 school year.
Second.
Second by Martinez. Roll call?
Motion by Schultz, second by Martinez. Mrs. Blair.
Yes.
Mr. Demonte. Mr. Anderson.
Yes.
Mrs. Beals.
Yes.
Mrs. Martinez.
Yes.
Mr. Schultz.
Yes.
6 yes, motion carries.
The old business item under the referendum, that we're trying to formalize the discussion from the Finance Committee in regards to a commitment being placed on the next ballot opportunity. And if the referendum were successful, restoration of our entry-level sports and band programming. It's important for us to get this confirmation just because communications with families happen right at the beginning of the school year, and people are always interested about what's happening next year. So that's kind of why we would ask the board for this action, which was kind of discussed at the end of the Finance Committee meeting.
Dennis?
Nope. Good idea.
Absolutely. I move to approve continued pursuit of a referendum question related to a tax rate increase on the next election ballot. And if there is a successful referendum at that time, the allowance for the district to reinstate entry-level athletics and a third band instructor and associated band programming to the extent possible.
Second.
Second by Anderson. Roll call?
Motion by Schultz and second by Anderson. Mr. Demonte. Mrs. Martinez.
Yes.
Mrs. Blair.
Yes.
Mrs. Beals.
Yes.
Mr. Anderson.
Yes.
Mr. Schultz.
Yes.
6 yes, motion carries.
Thanks. I just want to also, as we're thinking ahead to that, remind the board that at the July 14th Finance Committee meeting, we're excited to bring in our community again. And a few of the things that came up, I believe, either at the first Finance Committee meeting or since then, and just kind of discussion would be, some of the board members weren't as familiar with the actual sizes of the potential rate increase, meaning the 60 cents versus where we ended up at 35 cents and what that means, right? So we wouldn't mind reminding all the board members in our community about what those kind of options were or discussions were. And included with that would obviously be some discussion about our fees. And I know board members have just wanted to have an opportunity to review that, not necessarily for next year, but in the larger picture, because that is related to the referendum question issue for sure. So just wanted to make sure the board was aware that we were going to be talking about at least a few of those items on July the 14th. And we'll make sure we keep the board abreast to how that process will work prior to the meeting. And we had the one more item on the old business, I believe. Want to make sure Dr. Feely had an opportunity just to remind the board of anything that's going on with return to school, which continues to go on.
Better be advocating for no mask. That's all I have to say.
Well, just to clarify a few things that were spoken about earlier, right now, ISB has not given us direction. We have students that are in summer school. We are still abiding by all the same rules that we abided by when we finished the school year. Nothing has changed. I do anticipate a change coming. I do anticipate them telling us with whatever mitigations being adjusted and being less restrictive. I do think that's coming, but again, mid-July, maybe, August 1st, maybe. So we're going to continue to follow what ISB says. That is who gives us direction. What is confusing is, I think it was 2 Fridays ago, it was the 11th, I think, if that was a Friday, a message came out of kind of nowhere with no warning about for student athletes, that if they were vaccinated, then they did not have to wear masks inside or out. Furthermore, coaches even had the discretion while coaching. If they were vaccinated, they didn't have to wear masks, which didn't seem to line up with the direction we're getting for in school. But again, it came from ISB and IDPH. We follow their directives. So if you do have kids in summer camps or you hear kids talking about summer camps. That is the directive we were given for athletics. There has been no direction for inside the school building for us to change anything that we're doing. We also allowed parents, if they wanted to send us the vaccination, they could. They did not have to. We explained to them, this is the new rule. If you sent us this, we weren't going on the honor system. There's just too much information out there and people are nervous. So we said, if you want to share this with us, you can, but it is totally up to you and totally voluntary. You do not have to send us proof of a vaccination. Of course, when we got it, we gave it immediately to our nurse. So we didn't violate any kind of privacy rules and make sure all vaccination information stays in the health office. Yes.
What are we doing with it? Like
What's
when
that?
we, like, okay, so I was a good parent. And for my 2 kids at Warren next year, submitted my vaccination proof. But a part of me wondered, like, what are you guys doing with it? Like, is it just in case we need
So-
that data, or is it actually being used to
Great
plan
question.
and adjust mitigation efforts, of course, when guidance comes out, but, or does it impact quarantine? Like, what are you guys using it for?
So great question. That could come into play if ISB gives some kind of guidance and gives some kind of direction with that. Right now, we do not have that. Here's why it's beneficial. One, we weren't going to let a kid be without a mask or a coach without a mask, obviously around kids, if we didn't have proof they were vaccinated, because that was the rule they told us. As far as the school day goes, if parents are sending it in, again, optional right now, our nurse puts that with the other vaccinations in Power School. So now, let's say, God forbid, knock on wood, there's not going to be any instances here next year, but there is, when the nurse starts to contact trace, they have that information. They are not going to even call the parent or waste time contact tracing that kid. They're going to go through the other kids first.
So the kids that are vaccinated will skip the line.
Correct. You don't have to, that's the rules we're abiding under right now, that if you're vaccinated, you do not have to quarantine. There's no impact on you. I think we're going to have a mechanism that we inform parents still. Like right now, we send out that email blast in general. So I got a feeling we'll have some kind of communication to parents. But that's the purpose of it, Tony. We are trying to eliminate and speed up that contact tracing process. The same was said for teachers. Our nurse, again, something happened. That's what the first question our nurse asked of a staff member. Then if the staff member said, I was around so-and-so, again, first question, if they said they were vaccinated, she went on to the next person. So the same will be true for students.
Thank you. I appreciate that answer. Like I said, I had no problems turning it in and figured it was in capable hands. However, it's a political hot potato of showing proof for vaccination. And as a board member, I just feel like I'm going to be stepping in it one way or another.
So the other thing that,
but I'm glad that we're not just collecting it for the sake of collecting. Like, it feels better to me that it's being used to adjust programming or something to that effect.
And it's our nurse has access to us, not me, not a classroom teacher. It's with the vaccinate, their normal vaccination records that we have on all students.
Thank you.
So my understanding, contrary to what other people might have said, that collecting vaccination records, including COVID-19, is not a HIPAA violation because it's a vaccine.
That's correct.
is it IMED? Pat? Is it-
Correct. And then you also,
Will you explain what IMED was?
correct. The state has a database that all vaccines go into. Obviously, all of your, if you have children, your children went to various doctors. Those doctors, document those vaccines. The nurse and the state have access to that. That's how they check vaccine records. I don't have access
to hand in physicals.
That's correct. iCare has that all online, including the COVID vaccines on there as well. So if you happen to be vaccinated in the state of Illinois, that's something the nurse could look up if need be, or the health department could look up if appropriate.
But until now, what's not easy for us to do, and we don't know if we'll ever get this, it's not easy because for us to get a batch, like IMED is its own kind of system, and they're not necessarily in the business of giving us, here's a list of all of your students that have got their vaccination. It's more like if our nurse needs to go look up on an individual person, their vaccination record, they can do that. So we've talked to the Lake County Health Department about that, just about that. Part of that, the information is in there, but It's not like we generally have easy access to that. So, but we do have access, our nurses do have access to those records.
Well, and because they're mandated to check those shot records for school attendance, whether it be grade 9 or grade 12 with the meningitis vaccine.
What's tomorrow, Per? Tomorrow's the 23rd?
Oh, tomorrow is our second shot. We did host a COVID clinic at the Old Plain campus. That was optional, obviously. We're not mandating the vaccine. We're not telling anyone they have to do it. But we did partner with Jewel and our feeder schools. Tomorrow is the second shot between 3 to 7. I think the number was like, I was hoping for 200, but I think it was more like 325 that came for the first day. So we were excited, and quite a few kids got their meningitis shot as well. They're seniors. So we were excited about that. So we'll see what the turnout is tomorrow and go from there. And it's not just Warren kids, junior high kids as well coming. So, yep.
Thanks very much. Is there any other old business? Okay, next up is our second reception of the visitors. Again, anybody would like to address the board, they're more than welcome to.
Gonna have a filibuster.
Okay. That leaves us to the adjournment. Before we adjourn, I just want to thank the board in advance for your time with this superintendent search. As presented tonight, we're all going to realize it's going to take up a bunch of our time. So, and I just want to get out of the gate by saying thank you very much in advance for your time. It's appreciated. And that being said, I move to adjourn the meeting.
Second.
Second by Beals. Roll call.
Motion by Schultz and second by Beals. Mrs. Martinez.
Yes.
Mrs. Blair.
Yes.
Mr. Anderson.
Yes.
Mr. Demonte.
Yes.
Mrs. Beals. Mr. Schultz.
Yes.
6 yes. Motion carries.
Good night, everyone. Have a great night. Stay safe, stay healthy.
It was a marathon.
Oh, it's a sprint.
Oh, I'm